is Rachel Vesputa. I am the Tri-State SARE Project Director. I appreciate you all joining us today. This is our second webinar in the series, and I apologize because I think some of my introduction today will be a bit repetitive for some of you who were with us on webinar 1. But I know that we have some new faces, and it's always good to go over some things again. So just a little housekeeping to start. Today's webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on our website for further reference hereafter. And I do want to assure you all that the breakout rooms will not be recorded today. So feel free to share and discuss as you wish, knowing that it's not going to be broadcasted to everybody else hereafter. I do ask that in an effort to decrease any unnecessary background noise, we have you all muted. If you aren't muted, if you could mute yourself now, that would be much appreciated. Of course, happy to have you all unmuted during the breakout sessions. That will make for a lot more interaction between the groups. We'll you to use your video, especially during the breakout sessions as well. And if you haven't already seen the chat box in the right-hand corner of your screen at the bottom, make sure that's pulled up. So if you don't see it, go ahead and hover down at the bottom. You should see a little icon there that says chat. If you click on it, it should populate down there in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That's how we will communicate today. So we will be posting some links up there for our pre and our post evaluation, and then also we will be able to communicate that way through questions. So if you have any questions, certainly put it into the chat box. We will get you those answers. If not today, I will make sure that you get in contact with somebody who can answer it after the webinar. I just wanted to mention too, quickly that our project website will be changing pretty quickly. I'm not sure exactly how soon. So all of the information is there. You'll just see a bit of a different interface and a different layout. If you go to our Meat Systems website, it will redirect you. So I don't have any concern that you won't be able to find the materials. It will just, again, be a different layout, but certainly contact me at any time if you have any questions. Just a brief kind of rundown. Actually, I'm realizing I never changed my slide. So let's do that now. Just a brief rundown of our Tri-State SARE project. It is funded through the USDA and Northeast SARE. It's a collaborative project among the universities of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. We're in the first year of a new 3-year project and focusing our efforts this year on creating and writing a simple grazing plan. Today we're going to have, again, if you joined us for one, here with the layout, but we'll have some presentations as well as some breakout room sessions. You don't need to worry about doing anything for the breakout room sessions. As long as you stay connected, we'll get you to where you need to be. And I just a quick mention and note to say thank you for those of you who did answer those questions about your preference in terms of using a handwritten worksheet or a spreadsheet, as well as your level of confidence with math. That will help us get you into the right session today and make sure that you're comfortable with where we're at. I did also just want to remind everybody who participated in webinar 1 that there will be a certificate of participation today. So if you attend all 4 grazing plan workshops and do at least one of the following, which is attending one of the summer 2021 field training workshops, or have a one-on-one follow-up conversation about your participation in our program, what you've learned, or what additional guidance you would like, with one of our program staff, Rachel, myself, Jean King, or Sam Corcoran. Those will all qualify you to receive a participant certificate after the course is over. I did just want to share with you all as well that we have kind of partnered and collaborated with the New England Grazing Network this year to bring you this webinar series. The New England Grazing Network is made possible by the SARE Foundation, which is an organization that's committed to regenerative grazing. Sam Corcoran is the project coordinator, and she will be part of each of our 4 webinars. Her contact information is up on the screen right now, as well as the website for the New England Grazing Network. Certainly feel free to reach out to her at any time for further questions and some more individualized guidance. Just as a reference, she actually created the worksheets and exercises that we will be going through today. So certainly feel free to reach out after the webinar if you still have some questions. We're happy to help you. I just want to hand it over real quickly to Joe Bonelli, who is the Connecticut State SARE Coordinator and the PI on this Tri-State SARE project. He's just going to mention some grants that are available through Northeast SARE.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second of 4 webinars on this project. Just want to mention the resources that are available at Northeast SARE as well too. The slide that Rachel has up on the screen right now lists basically all the grant programs that are available through Northeast SARE. 2 I want to note today. Grants. So that if you're a service provider, you're NRCS or FSA or Extension or other organizations that work with farmers, the partnership grants may be an opportunity for you to secure funding of up to $30,000 working with a farmer, to look at testing ideas regarding production, marketing, and other farm issues as well too. The partnership grants are open now, and I believe they close the funding. The application closes on April 13th. So if you have any questions about the partnership grant program, feel free to reach out to me. The other one I want to mention too are the farmer grants, and they're open. They'll open for application later this fall, and that provides funding up to $15,000 to test an idea regarding marketing, farm production, etc. The other grant programs are on there as well too that you can see in terms of what they're for and the duration and required collaborators, etc. But I also want to mention again the Northeast SARE website, and the SARE website has a lot of other information as well too. Research been done by other grantees, as well as other resources that we see available as well too. And the website, I think, is very user-friendly in terms of searching for information, publications, data, et cetera, as well too. So again, there's SARE grants that are available. These are not matching grants, by the way. They actually will pay for labor as well. So if again any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Rachel, or others on the project as well too, and we'll be more than happy to help. Rachel.
Thank you, Joe. Like Joe said, please reach out at any time with any questions about the grants that are available through Northeast SARE. There are 3 state coordinators. There's a state coordinator for each respective state that's part of this tri-state program. So certainly feel free to jump onto our website. All of their contact information is up. If you are part of the Connecticut base, Joe would be the person to reach out to. And we also have 2 other colleagues that we work with in Massachusetts and Rhode Island who can also help answer some of those questions about grants through Northeast SARE. Next up, I just want to take a quick short minute or two for pre-evaluation questions. You should, as long as you see the chat box, that link should be popping up pretty soon that you can click on. Once you click on it, there'll be a series of questions that come up that you can go ahead and answer, and then click at the bottom of the screen the green submit button. I will give everybody just a minute or two now. There should be 5 questions, I believe. If you could answer those for us, we would appreciate it. All right. Hopefully everybody had the chance to move through those evaluation questions. If not, feel free to continue to work on those now as I just finish up the last of my introduction. And also, if for some reason you can't seem to find the link or you can't make it there to find the questions, we do send out the questions after the webinar for those who were not able to navigate it to them during the webinar. Just before we begin, I'd like to introduce our two speakers for today. Masood Hashimi is an extension faculty and pasture management specialist at UMass Amherst. He is a team leader for the crops, dairy, livestock, and equine programs. He's a graduate of UMass, and he has spent more than 30 years of field experience in agronomy, nutrient management, and pasture management, and he currently teaches 2 courses in these areas. Since 2000, Dr. Hashimi has been working closely with farmers to reduce the risk of non-point source pollution and provided technical assistance on pasture manure and mud management. His current research projects include and focus on soil health and extending the grazing season. And Sam Corcoran, who I had introduced previously, is also part of our speaker team today. She's a postdoc at UMass and part of the crop, dairy, livestock, and equine extension team as well. She is also the Southern New England project coordinator for the Livestock Institute and the New England Grazing Network. So with that, just give us a minute and we will switch over to Masood and he can begin.
Hello, everyone. So as Rachel said, my name is Masood Hashimi, and today I'm talking about a very important aspect of the grazing management, which is doing all of these calculations that we are going to do today. Now, the very first question is, why do we need those calculations? The major goal of doing those calculations is to make sure that the forage plants have enough time to recover after being grazed. And also, the other major goal is to prevent overgrazing, which is the mother of other issues on the pasture lands. In this calculation lecture, we are going to talk about how much forage is available to us based on several factors that we will talk. And also we are going to calculate how much forage do we need for our herds, our current herd. And we will talk about how many paddocks should be arranged, and also how many animals our current pasture can support, okay? Now, with that, the takeaway of this lecture, as you know, is coming with this forage balance sheet, which is very important, and hopefully that at the end of this lecture and all of those calculations that already provided to you and you're going to do during the breakout, you can fill out all of those information. It may seem kind of complicated, but it's not. So hopefully everybody can do that. So before we do all of those calculations, I need to mention that what kind of information do we need in order to start calculation. The very first information that we need is, first of all, we need to know how big our pasture land is. The second is that we need to find out what is the dominant grass. I'm sure that you may say, well, I have all kinds of grasses in my pasture, but at the same time, I'm sure that you know that there is one which is dominant. Now, if you have different paddocks, then probably each paddock may have its own dominant species, okay? So you need to find out, regardless, for instance, you have orchard grass, you have perennial ryegrass, you have Kentucky bluegrass, you have tall fescue, and one corner of the pasture which is wet, you have reed canary grass. However, there is one which is dominant, and you need to identify that dominant grass species. Then the other information that you need to know right up front is what is the forage height that I'm targeting to start the grazing. Okay, some people may say I'm very comfortable to start grazing my animals when the forage reaches about 10 inches. Some people say 12 inches. And I would, before I forget, I wouldn't go above the 12 inches because of several problems that it creates. Okay, but I need to know what is the minimum forage height that I'm comfortable with before I move the animals. According to the NRCS, the famous recommendation is that graze half and leave half. But some, depending on the management skill and depending on forage type, and also depends on the type of the animals, because animals are different. You can graze it down to 4 inches regardless how tall you are to start with. Okay. The other information is that it would be nice to know what is the percentage of the legume. I mean, if you have anywhere above 20%, the more the better. 20 to 30% legume, doesn't matter what kind of legume. Then that shows that your pasture is more productive. It fixes nitrogen and contribute that nitrogen to the companion grasses. So it is different than we have or we don't have legume in the pasture. And the other information, and it's totally up to you, is that how often do you feel comfortable to rotate the animals? Some people are, they look at this as a very important, the priority, and therefore they say, I'm going to rotate my animals every day. Some people will say, I don't have time to do that. But there is a general rule. And the general rule is, first of all, the rotation shouldn't be more than 7 days, because if it's more than 7 days, you can call it continuous grazing rather than rotational grazing. And also the other thing is that if you have a high performing animals, especially the lactating cows or goats, then you should use the more frequent, and you need to go with 1 or 2 days. But idle horses or beef, you can go up to 7 days for rotation. Okay. The other thing that you really need is pasture stick. And a lot of people may think that pasture stick is just to measure the forage height. Yes, you can. That's one of the uses for the pasture stick is to measure the forage height, and a grazer should have it all the time to measure the height before and after the grazing. However, the pasture stick is really a multi-purpose tool for grazing management. Okay, and for instance, these are the one that I'm going to tell you, that these are some of the information that you can get from the pasture stick. First of all, you can find the average expected dry matter of the dominant grasses in your pasture land. Okay, so that helps you to get some idea what is the goal, what is the expectation. Okay, and also the pasture stick determines how dense your pasture is. Okay, the denser, the translates into more productivity, of course. You can also get the information, what is the growth rate of pastures during the spring or in the summer, and I'm sure you already know that the growth rate of pastures is totally different during the grazing season. Usually it's high during the spring and it's very low in the summer. Okay. Then also the pasture stick will tell you what is the average rotation period you need during the spring and during the summer, okay? And that is adjusted based on the growth rate of the pasture. So as you can see, there are so much information that you can get from pasture stick. Last time I checked, at least in Massachusetts, you could get pasture stick for free from NRCS. However, the situation might have changed, but you can buy those things. They are very cheap, and you can buy them online. So I would, if you are a grazer, I would definitely recommend to have one or more of those pasture stick all the time. So once you have the pasture stick, you can slide it under the canopy over the soil, and then you can stand and see how many dots you can see. I'll show you what I mean by dots. And of course, the more dots that you see, that translates into the less productivity, less dense of pasture that you have, okay? And so a combination of information about the number of dots and also the dominant species that you identify, the combination of these two will give you a very good, acceptable estimate of the dry matter yield on your paddock. Now, this is a pasture stick, and as you can see, there are one side of the pasture stick that it shows different dots. And again, once again, if you see more dots, that means your pasture is not quite good. That means it's less productive, it's less dense. And underneath, I copied the link to the NRCS pasture stick instructions, and or you can just Google pasture stick instruction and it comes out. Okay, but one crucial recommendation that I have for everybody is that don't rely on one reading. Okay, you need multiple readings. Okay, depends on the size of the pasture and depends on the uniformity of the pasture. The less uniform and the bigger size of the pasture land, that means you need multiple, several readings, and then take an average of all the readings, and then with the dominant species that you will identify, you can use this pasture stick to find out what is the average dry matter yield you can expect. Okay. Now this is also in the pasture. Yeah, it seems big, but it is also on the pasture stick. And if you look at this table, it has two parts. The first part at the top, it shows the number of dots that you can see. You may see nothing, or you may see one dot, you may see two or three, or more than three. The less dot you see, as I said, that means the most dense, and therefore the more productive your pasture is. Now, on the left side of the table is the different options. These options are based on the most common species that you can find. Orchard grass is a very common, bluegrass, and then perennial ryegrass and the tall fescue. And depends on if they have clover or you're adding nitrogen, that gives you different range of dry matter, okay, that you can expect. And that production is based on 1 inch of your forage. So if you are going to let the animals graze, say 5 inches, that means those numbers needs to be multiplied by 5. Okay, so those are the average weight per inch per acre. Your paddock may not be 1 acre. Okay, so I want you to be aware of. Now you may say, okay, now it doesn't have to be between 2 and 3. You are going to have 10 readings. An average of 10 readings may gives you 2.5. Okay, if it gives you 2.5, then you basically you're taking an average of those numbers. Okay. Okay. This is the table that you don't see on the pasture stick. This is the table that I'm giving you now, and your data, your balance sheet has it, but also you can get it from some references. Those are very important numbers that you need to have, and that is how much that table basically tells you how much your animal needs. Not all animals require the same amount of dry matter per day. For instance, the dry, but everything is based on their body weight. Okay, so there are two factors in this table. One, remember that it's a size of the or average size of the animal, but also it depends on the type of the animals. So with that, so for instance, a dry dairy cows needs 1.8% of its body weight. Beef cattle, which is over 1 year, requires 2.25% of its average body size. Okay, for sheep, for instance, it could be anywhere between 3.5% and 4% of its body weight. I'm just saying, for instance, if a sheep on average is 200, that means 200 times an average of those two, or you can use 3.5%, or you can use 4% of its weight, body weight. For horses, there are two factors: whether horse is very active, or it's you use it for the riding frequently, or it's idle horse. So if it's idle horse, probably you need only 2% of its body weight, but if it's active, it's 3%. The other factor that determines this number is if you are preventing horses from obesity or not. If you're concerned about the obesity, of course you're going with the 2%. Okay. Now the other thing is, if a forage is not grazed by the animal, regardless of type of the animal, then the rest of the forage will be trampled or fouled, like especially with the horses. That what they do when they deposit, okay, when they deposit manure on one part, they're not going to touch that. So that's why in horse pasture, what you see, unfortunately, you see uniformity. There are some parts that have high forage, and then there are some places that is overgrazed, simply because the horses are not touching those areas. So there is a utilization efficiency that I show you how to calculate. Now, this is a table that just gives you an idea that the grazing efficiency in different systems are not really the same. As you move from a continuous grazing, which is 40% at most, okay, you're lucky if you get 40%, the rest would be trampled and it would be fouled. And you can increase that efficiency to by increasing the number of paddocks. Okay, so at the end of your calculation, if you say, okay, I'm a little bit short, how can I improve? There are some strategies that you can increase and improve the productivity, but one of them is increasing the number of paddocks and using more rotation, and that gives you higher forage availability. This is my recommendation. As I said, it's subject to debate. Some people follow that recommendation. Some people have their own ideas. Based on I think the best quality of the forage is when the forage is between 4 inches and 10 inches. This is the time that you still don't have any stem, but at the same time, the forage quality is high because the leaves are tender, the leaves are fresh, and and then I recommend to stop grazing at 4 inches. Okay. The other very important factor and aspect of the grazing management is considering the appropriate rest period. Okay, some may use 30 days, regardless of the time of the grazing season, and they say, okay, I'm going to move my animals every 30 days, but that's not really a right management, because, as you know, the growth rate of the pasture moves. It goes up, and then during the summer slump comes down, and then it goes up a little bit during the fall, and then goes down. And if you consider everything exactly the same, and you just give them a fixed number, 30 days, well, it might be okay for during the spring and early summer, but definitely is not okay for the summer. And therefore, you are going to have some overgraze during the summer. And once you have an overgraze, it stays with you. Okay, it's really, really difficult to fix the problem of the overgrazing. And as you know, overgrazing is the sin of all sins, which means it creates all kinds of issues, from weeds to unwanted plants, you name it. Okay, well, these are the book values. Okay, these are the book values for cool season grasses in the northeast. Now, as you can see, the rest period is much shorter during the month of April, May, and June, 15, 18, 24, whereas July, August, September, October, and possibly November, with this global warming. Now, some people still grazing in November. So as you go toward the November, the rest period goes up, and that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, you are going to have this as a, so I'm just overview what you are going to see. And let's suppose that you have, my numbers might be different than what you have on your data sheet, okay, your practice sheet. So if, let's suppose that you have 10 grazing beef, and then you have with average weight of 750, and you have 8 sheep with average weight of 220. You have 10 acres of pasture land. You have decided to move your animals for days. Remember that this is your decision. And you decided to graze when the pasture height is about 10 inches, and you want to graze it down to about 4 inches. That means you have 6 inches available forage for grazing. Now remember that table that I just showed you, and it is on the pasture stick, tells you per inch. So that means you need to multiply those numbers by 6. Okay. You are a good grazer, and you are able to identify the dominant species, and you found that it is orchard grass, and you see a good population of clover. So you use pasture stick, and you saw 2 dots on average. Okay, and that then if you look at the orchard grass and clover on that table plus 2 dots, you see the average expectation of dry matter is roughly 250 pounds per acre. Okay. The daily, based on the table that I just showed you, the daily dry matter intake for the beef is 2.25%, and for the sheep is 3.5%. And so therefore the utilization efficiency rate is you always leave 1% for the trampling, okay, whether you like it or not. Of course, if you rotate more often, that 1% might be a little bit low, but I always put that 1% just to make sure that I'm on the comfortable zone. So 2.25 plus 1% is basically 3.25% of the body weight of the beef, which is 750. Remember, make sure that you're using 0.0325, okay, when you multiply it, not 3.25. And the same for the sheep. The utilization efficiency for sheep is better than, so it's 0.450. Now, step 1 is that you need to know how much feed you need for 10 cows and 8 sheep. So you need to find out how much you need for the herd. And the requirement is the number of animals by average weight by the utilization rate that I just gave you. For beef, you know that you have 10 cows. You need that average is 750, and the utilization is 2.25 plus 1, which is 0.0325, and that sums up to 244 pounds dry matter, remember it's dry matter, it's not pasture. The pasture may have only 15% dry matter, okay? So don't make any mistake about that. So this is 244 pounds dry matter per day for beef, and then you do exactly the same thing. The only difference is efficiency of the utilization, and then you sums up to 79 pounds per day for your 8 sheep, and the total would be 323 pounds. Okay, so this is how much you need per day. Okay, for the whole. And now for the 4-day rotation, because this is what you decided, for you to multiply it by 4 and you come with 1,292 pounds. Okay, this is how much you need. Now, if I were you and I'm doing my calculation, not in this exercise that Sam and others will give you, no, in your real land, just make it easy for yourself and round it off. So I would use 1,300 instead of 1,292, okay? The step 2 is that how much, okay, that was how much do you need. Now let's find out how much do we have. In order to do that, first of all, you need to how much forage you have for the grazing. Remember, you start at 10, you end at 4, so you have 6 inches, and you already determined 2 dots plus orchard grass, and then the average is 250, so that sums up to 1,500. This is how much you have for grazing, okay, which is a little bit more than what you need. Now, the next question is, how many acres do you need for each rotation of 4 days? So the forage need, demand, you divide it by forage have, or available, and that gives you how much acre do you need for each rotation. Now 1,292 divided by 1,500, that gives you roughly about almost an acre, 0.9, okay, and that's how much you need for 4 days rotation. The next step is, okay, I found that, I know, let's find out how many paddocks do I need, okay. The number of paddocks is the rest period. Remember, you can use those book values that I gave you in the previous slide, divided by number of days on the pasture. You decided 4 and plus 1. Now, if you're looking at this simple formula, 1 is fixed, days on pasture is fixed based on what you decide, but what it is not fixed, and it changes and makes it a little bit tricky, is the rest period with its changes. Now, because the rest period is changing, the number of paddocks is not fixed, okay? Part of the season, you may need only 5 or 6 paddocks, whereas another part of the season, you may need 10. So remember that you need to do it for different parts of the grazing season. So, for example, in May, the table shows that you need 18 days for the rest period. So 18 divided by 4 plus 1, that means you roughly need 5.5 paddocks. You already mentioned that each paddock is about 0.9 acres, right? Or you can use 1 acre if you want. So you need 5.5 paddocks, whereas in August, which is the rest period is 36, you need 10 paddocks, okay? Now then the question is, okay, how much land do I need? I have only 10 acres, okay? Do I exceed my availability, land availability, or not? Well, the total land required is the number of paddocks times paddock area, okay? Now, it changes because the number of paddocks changes. So in May, as you remember in the previous box, it shows that you need 5.5 paddocks, and each one is 0.9 acre. So all you need is 5 acres. So you have 5 acre extra. You need to think about it ahead of time. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to get somebody to come and cut the hay for you and bale it, and you can store it for during the November and next April? You may want to decide to sell it. Okay, But in August, remember, in August, you need 10 paddocks, and now you need 9 acres. So that means that just because in May you have 5 acres, that doesn't mean you decide to increase your animals, because then you are going to have deficiency in terms of pasture land. Okay, so make sure that you take that into consideration. And then finally, the forage balance sheet that I showed you at the very beginning. Now, now some of you are very comfortable using Excel sheets. Some people are using some other forms. You can just do it by hand. And so this forage sheet is very important. You can, once you fill it out and you're comfortable with it, you can just post it on the board. Okay, that gives you a good information. Now you just put that you have 10 beef, you have 8 sheep, the average weight we already talked about it, the utilization you already calculated. You can put those things. These are daily, but for the month of April, all you have to do is multiply this by 30 days, right, in April, and you sums up a 7.32 thousand, because I put 1,000 up there. So it's 7.32 thousand pounds of dry matter that you need in April. You can do exactly the same calculation, and you sums up to 52,000 pound of dry matter for the beef, and you do exactly the same thing for the sheep. You come up with 16.9, and you just add them together. So you roughly need 70,000 pound of dry matter. Okay, and then for dry matter production, everything is very simple. The only thing that makes it tricky, and you need to do it, is this. This is the average growth of your pasture. Okay, so it's very difficult to say, and there is no magic number that I can give you, because the growth of the pasture in one farm is totally different than another farm. Depends on the soil type, depends on the dominant species that you have, depends on the environmental, the climate condition. So it changes. For the sake of it, let's suppose that you have 4.5 inches available for grazing in April. You have 250 pounds per inch, and then you have 10 acres, and therefore this is how much you can expect. And if add them up, it sums up to 76, and that means the good news is that you have more available than what you need. Okay. So the rest, another slide that shows, okay, well, I have more or I have less that I need. What am I supposed to do? Okay, so we're going to talk about that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood.
Sure.
So I think at this point, unless you or Sam have anything more that you want to share with us, we'll have Mackenzie break us into the breakout rooms, and we'll get started on some of these calculations.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to start the breakout sessions, and Rachel, can you just let everybody know what time we'll be coming back, just so that they kind of have a heads up? And once I hit start breakout, you'll see a join come on your screen. So just be sure to click that so you go into the correct room.
Sure, yeah. So we'll be in the breakout room for about a half an hour, and we will regroup at 11:15. All right. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone's breakout session went well. I'm not sure if everybody had the time that we needed to get through everything, but we'll have another breakout session in a couple minutes so we can wrap up some questions there. And then also, again, I'll just make sure that we all know that there's plenty of people to reach out to after today's webinar if we still need some help and some guidance on some of those calculations. So with that, is there any questions? I think maybe what I'll do is I'll send it over to, I'll give Masood and Sam the floor if we have questions come in. Certainly type those into your chat box now. If you do, I'll give it a minute or so. And if not, then we'll jump into the forage balance sheet, and it will give us a little bit more time in our second breakout session.
This is Joe. Now, one question that came up in our group, which I thought was an excellent point, was animal growth or lactation curves, where the nutritional requirements are going to change over the season, and not really built into these spreadsheets, but how do we consider those things, or how might we modify this approach to account for those?
Sam and Masood, I'll let you guys take the floor.
I was gonna default to letting Masood answer first if you'd like to. You're muted.
Okay, that was an excellent question. Okay, remember that it's not just that. There are so many other things about this lecture and about this exercise that changes. Okay, and probably the most changing aspect of this, the whole calculation, is the pasture growth per month. Okay, it's a huge difference between one farm to another, or even one paddock to another paddock. So your excellent question. The things that we are presenting today is honestly is a basic things. Okay, it's basic things, and everybody should and grazing management is basically an art and science. Okay, it's a lot of things is just try and error things, and that constitutes the art part of it. Okay, yes, it is science, but because there is so much unknown factors and sometimes known factors that affect all the calculation, everybody needs to do it themselves based on what they have. Yes, the animals growing, they are not really. So we say, when we say average 750, honestly, I was expecting a question, say, how do you weigh a cow, big cow? Okay. well, it's might be a little bit easier for the beef, because sooner or later you're gonna slaughter it, right? And then you can get some idea of how roughly what was the weight, average weight. But in terms of dairy, it's really hard to say. And so you have to go with the book values, unfortunately. And the dairy cows are based on the breed are totally different. That Jersey is totally different than Holstein, and Holstein is different than Brown Swiss, and so forth. And so this lecture and this calculation is gives you a rough estimate and gives you how to do your own calculations. And so I'm sorry that I cannot answer your question, because your question is pretty legitimate. Cows growing, sheep growing, and that's why we say average. And other than that, I don't know what else I can say.
One main point that I would make in addition to that is that this average weight would be an average of all the animals over the entire grazing season, and not just over the animals at the beginning of the grazing season.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so something that that we do sometimes is, depending on, and I think farmers have a good idea of what are your rates of gain. And so maybe what your average herd weight is in April, but what your rates of gain, for example, if you're doing meat production, look like. And so what your new average is going to be in May. And then what your new average might be in June. Or maybe you have benchmarks because you need a certain amount of weight gain, or you need a certain amount of growth. And so you can calculate a different utilization rate for each month and just plug that into your calculation. And that's, I think, a really simple way to incorporate your expected or anticipated growth. This came up in our group as well, and it's a great question because it shows understanding, I think, which is good. There are some spreadsheets that have nice algebraic equations, and they'll build in, a certain percentage of rate of gain and give you really maybe a different recommendation for the first half of April and a different one for the second half. But I think those get, if you like those, I think they're good if you find one you like, but I think sometimes they attempt to put too much specificity into models that don't actually reflect real life. And so I think what Masood was saying is, yeah, picking a monthly average, calculate perhaps a different daily utilization by month might be the best and the easiest way to incorporate that into your model.
I think there was another question that came through from Paul, and I'll just quickly say, Paul, that I will make sure I get you in touch with somebody to answer that question and work through that question with you. Just would like to try to keep us on track so that we have even more time in that second breakout room. So I promise I'll make sure that I get you connected with somebody. And if we happen to have time at the end of our second breakout, I'll make sure that we address that then. But with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Masood to discuss the full.
Okay. So do you want me to go back to my lecture and talk about the Sam? You're mute.
If you could, I have my mute button on here and on this little mic. Can you see it? It's throwing me off. Anyways, if you could go back through and give us maybe a slower walkthrough of the forage balance sheets.
I see.
Because you still have about, I think, 5 minutes-ish, Rachel, I think. Yeah, and then we'll go back into our breakout groups.
Okay, how much time do I have?
5-ish minutes.
Jesus. Do you see this balance sheet? Everybody sees that?
Nope.
Okay, let me go back to, okay, let me share, and then, how about now? Oops.
Yes.
Okay, so, okay, yeah, I very briefly mentioned that at the end of the calculation, this is hopefully that this is something that covers everything that we discussed, and this is the end product that I think that everybody likes to have, and that is, we call it forage balance sheet. Now that gives a little bit more detail whether we have extra forage or short in forage every month rather than based on the whole year. Now this again, my example that I'm showing you is different than example that is being provided to you, but the same concept. And I think that having two different animals helps a little bit more to capture the forage balance sheet. So in my example, let's suppose that you have 10 animals, 10 beef, and you have 8 sheep. You already know that. We already said that let's assume that the average weight is 750 for beef, 220 for sheep, and I showed you that the daily utilization of the herd is 244. We calculated that for beef, and we calculated 79 for sheep, and those are daily. Okay, all you have to do is just multiply those by the number of days per month. In April, you have 30 days, and therefore 244 by 30, that gives you 7.32. And in order to, to have a space in that table, you just put 1,000 at the top. Okay, you calculate everything for every month, and as I said, you may add November if you want. You are in the southern New England, and you're still grazing animals in November, and therefore you do it, and the total would be 52,000 pounds of dry matter. And then with sheep, then you sums up to 17, and finally the total required dry matter for the whole herd in your farm would be 69 69, or you can use 70 just to be on the safe side, 70,000 pounds dry matter. Now, that was what you need. Now, what do you have, which means dry matter production in 10 acres, okay? There are things that are fixed and you don't have to worry about it. And that is, for instance, 250, you can get it from the table. You have 10 acres, so you have that. The only thing that is changing during the months, different months, is the pasture forage growth. And it's different. As you can see, for example, I use 4.5 for April, I used 8 for May, and whereas in October, it's only 2 inches. Okay, so those are inches. Now, as I very briefly mentioned, those numbers are really difficult to get. There is no such a thing as a book value. There is no table available that shows you to make calculation for you to easy. I'm sorry to say that you have to do it yourself. Okay, if you want to get a more realistic number of dry matter production, you need to know how much your forage grows in each month. How do you do that? Well, you have to do it over maybe two years or even 3 years. So every year in the month of April, you're using the pasture stick at the beginning of the month, and then you use it at the end of the month. So you have how much growth is. But then I would clip it down to 5 inches, 4 inches, whatever you're comfortable with, the grazing, after grazing height. And then I do it for several parts of the pasture paddock using maybe a flag. So next month, you start with the beginning, and then you measure the end, and you take an average of all the readings, 4, 5, 6, whatever number you're comfortable with. So those numbers are really, really different from farm to farm, even from paddock to paddock, okay? Depends on the type of the soil, whether it's a sandy, clay, loamy, depends on precipitation. Did we have rain, or sometimes we don't have? And finally, the dominant species in one pasture or one farm or one paddock might be totally different, and therefore we can expect different dry matter. This 250 that I mentioned here is just for orchard grass. If your dominant is different, say dominant is ryegrass or it's Kentucky bluegrass, this 250 will change. And the growth of the pastures are different. Kentucky bluegrass grows nicely during the early spring and in the fall, whereas orchard grass might perform better during the summer. So everything is changing. And so unfortunately, I cannot help you with the top row. And this is something that you need to, but for calculation purpose, I use 4.5 for April. May is the best because it gives you May and June gives you the highest growth. And then once you get to the July, even though it's better than August, but it still is less than other months. And then it goes up again during the fall, not as much as you would expect, but then it goes down during the October and November, okay? And for this calculation, remember, as I said, I use 0.325 for beef and 0.450 for sheep, which has a better utilization efficiency. So then after you make all of those calculations, you sums up to roughly about 77,000, or I would downgrade it to 75. So now you need 70, you have 75, and therefore you're good to go. You have just a 5,000 pounds dry matter extra overall. And in our breaking room, our sister said that, what am I gonna do during the August? Well, even though you have extra, that doesn't mean. So unless you cut the hay in the months that you have extra, and use it during the month of August, you'll be in trouble if you just let the animals continue grazing as before. Okay, so you probably may end up with giving them some dry hay during the month of September and August. Okay, with that, I guess I'm done. And well, and finally, you need to adjust the grazing pressure based on what you have. Okay, this graph, this simple graph shows you if this is red line is your feed demand, okay, and then this is the pasture growth. As you can see, when your feed demand is low, most of the time you have extra feed, okay? In that case, that's not good because yes, overgrazing is bad, and but undergrazing is also bad, okay? Because the quality of the pasture goes bad and some other things. So in case that you have low pressure from your animals, then you have fence out some part of the pasture for producing hay or haylage, or you may decide to increase the number of animals. Whereas if your pressure is very high and your feed demand is high, and as you can see, except a very few weeks, you have enough feed, most of the time you don't. In that case, you need to make some adjustment, either remove some of the animals or using additional dry hay or some other feed during the months that the forage grows very slowly. But the whole idea is that don't let the animals overgraze. Okay. Okay, I guess with that.
Thank you, Masood.
Yeah, sure.
So I think what we'll do is have Mackenzie break us into our breakout rooms again. We'll adjust a little bit here, and we'll spend about 20 minutes in there. We'll come out at about 11:55, so we can do a quick wrap up, and then our post-evaluation questions, and we'll go from there. So Mackenzie, I am ready when you are. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to give just Sam and Masood just a minute to wrap up and mention anything that they think they would like to.
Sam, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing. We had a great question that some of you are probably wondering that ties back to collecting on-farm data. So one person asked, which was a great question, well, what about a drought year? These are nice averages. And so I completely agree. We would recommend having some of that on-farm data so that you can say in a drought year, I know how much regrowth I get, or how much regrowth I don't get rather. And then you can make a plan, a resiliency plan specific to a drought year. So yeah, these are nice static pictures, but definitely on that forage balance sheet, play with regrowth, look at what regrowth actually is on your farm, and then use those to make your plans.
Yeah, and in my breakout session, I mentioned that they need to go out and measure every month, and not just 1 year. They have to do it over 2 or 3 years to get at more realistic numbers. There is no such a thing as book value. There is no such a thing as a table. I wish there was to give you.
Great. Thank you both very much. I very much appreciate all the time everybody has spent today to put our worksheets and exercises together. I hope everybody else has found some value in taking it step by step through the calculations. The only thing I'll mention quickly is that, Paul, I know we didn't get to your question. I'm happy to get you in contact with somebody afterwards, so I will work on that this afternoon. If anybody else has questions, please type them into the chat now. I will make sure that I look through the chat as we close the webinar today so that nobody gets left behind. The other thing that I will mention right now too before we jump off is our third webinar in the series, which is coming up on March 23rd. It will be again 10 to 12, and We will get your information out to you a few days in advance as we did this time again. So the link to connect to the webinar, as well as any exercises that will be utilized in the breakout rooms in that third webinar. Before we wrap up today, I'm hoping if everybody could go ahead now and take the post-evaluation questions, I would appreciate that. Mackenzie just posted that link in the chat for us. Another series of questions, and then aside from that, once you submit it, if you have more questions, type them into the chat. Otherwise, we'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you back again on March 23rd. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.